Right, nice one. So we're going to be looking at a guy called Caleb today. So we're going to be, looking at a thing that I've called "Give Me This Mountain." We're going to see a few stories in the life of Caleb. We're going to do quite a few passages in the Bible to kind of walk through a bit of his story. And this is something that kind of I felt maybe, I don't know, it's ages since I've been in Latchford. Not since I've been in Latchford, I've been here most weeks. But ages since I stood up, and I said to Lucas maybe June, July, that there was something that I really felt God was going to say to us and really had on his heart to say. And so I said, right, next time a free hit comes, I feel I need to speak on this. So, and it's quite good because September is a time when there's a lot of new stuff going on, and we're going to be just looking at kind of what it is to rediscover maybe either new passions or really walk into what it is that God has always called us to do, but maybe we've kind of struggled to walk into, or maybe we back away from, or maybe we're afraid of. And the clock has been literally hacked out of the wall by the looks of things, so that means I think I don't have to stick to half an hour. I'm just saying, it was good. We chiseled it out this morning. And so it's going to be Give Me This Mountain. And we're going to look at those of you who have kind of got your Bibles ready, we're going to be looking at Numbers chapters 13 and 14. But while you get in there, give me this mountain as the topic. Now, some of you don't want a mountain, and that is valid because, as most of us know, mountains are rubbish. And I was at a wedding yesterday, and weddings are obviously really long. And so I was at a wedding for 10, 12, 15, 39, whatever, how many hours it was. It's a lot of sitting around and not enough food. And so we were there. The only thing worse than sitting in the same table for 12 hours is Chris Lowry running up a mountain, because that is just the worst. He sent me a picture saying, would you rather be here? No. Honestly not. And just to prove that mountains are rubbish, I have a friend who proposed up a mountain, and it's a very romantic, beautiful story as his fiancée gets up to leave the building. You stay where you are, Kathy. And so, some of you are very pleased at my misery when I go away and bad things happen to me, and we'll talk about those. And I am like some kind of international Mr. Bean, that I just go places and bad things happen. But I have friends who are even worse. And so this friend, he was going up this mountain, and he said, right, I tell you what, I'm a bit nervous, but if we get all the way to the top, I am going to propose. That is the deal. And so it starts badly as he's driving up to the mountain, and he reverses his car into a bollard. It's not a great start. It's not the sign you're looking for. I've crashed the car. Wonderful. Then he starts walking up. Then he realizes he's forgot to lock the car, so he has to come all the way back. So he's now panicking. They've got no gear. But you don't need gear because it's April. Who needs gear up a mountain? You can see how beautiful that is in April. I mean, who needs proper camping gear? Because England in April is sunny, clearly. And so there they are up a mountain. Look how exciting and fun that looks. And so he's walking up, and this guy who's kind of had a bit of a bad experience with marriage, and this guy says to him, you're not going to do something stupid like propose anytime, are you? And he's thinking, oh my goodness, great, thanks Lord for bringing this encouraging man alongside me. And he's like, right, it's all right, as long as we get to the top, I'm going to propose. And then kind of halfway up, Kathy starts getting tired, and she starts getting cold, and she's like, do we have to get to the top? He's like, we have to get to the top. And he's thinking, we don't get to the top, I am not proposing. And she's getting more annoyed. She's got poor gear. As you can see, it was cold. And he said her gloves were terrible. And he said to me, we weren't married at this point, so I didn't think about lending him my own gloves, because he's a terrible boyfriend. Who knew? And so a stranger gave her some socks to put on her hands. So she's wearing a strange man's socks at this point. She's like, really, do we have to go? And he's like, yeah, we do have to get to the top. She starts getting a bit annoyed at him. And then all of a sudden, a dog just comes along and does what dogs do when they get excited on her leg. And he thinks this is hilarious. She thinks less hilarious. And so all of a sudden there's this, she's like, right, let's go home. He's like, no. So we get to the top, and he's thinking, finally we're at the top. And he's got his mates to have this sign which says, Kathy, will you marry me? They pull it out. A gust of wind rips the sign in half and blows it away. And it's just like, oh, wonderful. And he starts saying, will you marry me? She can't hear him. He can't hear the response. She just wants to go home. I mean, that's the way to do a proposal, because she will say anything. You get me off this mountain. I will do anything you want, even spend my life with you just to get off this mountain. So thankfully for them, there it is. What a beautiful romantic story it is. And thankfully it does end There we go. So it's all good. So it's all good. And there's Dylan and Chloe. And so it's all fine. But we can see mountains are rubbish. But there is a guy who would maybe disagree that mountains are rubbish. And he's called Caleb. And we're going to look at his story. So in Numbers 13, and we're going to start at verse 17. So the kind of nation of Israel, they were the kind of, I don't know what people know about the story, but they were a people of God. And they were kind of God's kind of tribe, as it were, at the time. And they had been in slavery for years. And God had brought them out of slavery and kind of done some crazy miracles to rescue them from slavery. And he said, I am going to show you this amazing land. And that had happened, and they'd done all this, and now they're on the verge of taking this land. But it's all defended and it's walled. And so the guy in charge, Moses, he sends out a bunch of spies to go and look at the land and say, hey, can you tell us about this land that God has promised us? And that is where we're going to jump into the story. In verse 17, it tells us, when Moses sent them up to explore Canaan, he said, look, go up through the Negev into the hill country. See what the land's like, and whether the people who live there are strong and weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good? Is it bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they walled or unwalled? Are they unwalled or fortified? How is the soil? Is it fertile or is it poor? Are there trees in it? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land. And then they go in, and then we're just going to skip ahead a little bit to verse 27. So they go in, and then it says in verse 27, they came back, and it says, they gave Moses this account. We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does indeed flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit. But the people who live there, they are very powerful. And the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites live in the Negev, the Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites live in the hill country. And the Canaanites live near the sea along the Jordan. And then we see the guy that we're looking at today. And then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and say, hey, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. But the men who'd gone up with him said, we can't attack these people. They are stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they'd explored. They said, the land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw are of great size. And so basically they then kind of say, right, we're not going to go in. And then chapter 14, we're not going to read. My mic's about to die. I'm just going to, I don't think anyone noticed, Dennis. It was good. Well, smooth, seamless. I was at a church in Orlando last week. They were very slick. And we are who we are. And I'm happy with that. And so, yeah, we're not that bothered. So basically, it goes on in 14. I'm not going to read the whole thing in 14. But the people are then afraid. And the people don't go in. And there's Caleb and there's another guy, Joshua, and they are desperate. They're saying, honestly, let's not do it. And they say in verses kind of 8 and 9, it says, look, if the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into the land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and he's going to give it to us. But don't rebel against him. Don't be afraid of the people, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Don't be afraid. And then it says the whole assembly taught about stoning them. And then just to finish it off, we're going to flip to 14, verse 21. This will be the last bit of flicking for a while. And then basically, kind of Moses goes away, this leader, and has this time with God. And God says to him, look, nevertheless, as surely as I live, and the glory of the Lord fills the earth, not one of these people who saw my glory and saw the signs I did in Egypt and the wilderness, but who disobeyed me and tested me, not one of them will see the land I promised on oath to their ancestors. No one who treated me with contempt will see it. But because my servant Caleb has a different spirit and follows me wholeheartedly, I will bring him into the land, and his descendants will inherit it. And so that is what we're going to be looking at, and that is where we're going to see. We're going to jump into a story at the end as well. But we're going to talk about kind of where God calls us to do something and what it means to kind of face up to the giants that are there, to look them in the eye and say, we have a God who is bigger. We have a God who has called us to take this land, and we are going to be people who know what it is to trust that he is bigger than what we see. And Caleb is a man who could have settled for less. We're going to see that in his story. He could have hid back in the crowd from what we've already seen, but we're actually going to see later in his life he could have settled for less as well. But he's a guy who knew what it was to say, I believe that God has got bigger plans for us, and I don't want just half of what God's promised. I want it all. And that is what we want at the outset. It's not just at the outset of a year we want that. We want it all the time. But you know what? September's a good time to say, right, God, what has been lying dormant in me? What is there that's in my heart that I've maybe kind of let slide and kind of lost a bit? And that's what we're going to see. And I'm kind of going to share about kind of two of the kind of mountains that I've got in my life where I've kind of felt like, God, what is it you've put on my heart? And in the last kind of year, there's very much been two things for me that have been there, and they are to kind of really just get these bunch of incredible young people we have in this church and just really show them everything of what it means to follow Christ and to see them grow into all that Christ has called them to be, all that God has made them to be, and have that excitement. And then the second mountain is and I'm going to share a bit about this later, is in this school to kind of deal with some of the young people in this school and it's really just to introduce them to this Jesus and say, hey, there's a God out here who loves you and who wants you to know him. And they are my two mountains. And I'm in this kind of weird position where I kind of know at the moment for the next season what God is calling me into. And there's many times in my life where if you said, what is the thing that God is calling you to, I probably wouldn't necessarily know. I'd know about what it means about how I should live my life, but I didn't really have that kind of thing. And if we're in that place where we kind of go, I don't really know what's on my heart, what's on God's heart, well, that's okay. But, it involves sometimes kind of spending that time with God saying, God, will you speak? Because, he doesn't just put that in there when we're just going around our busy lives kind of oblivious to him. Sometimes we need to get on our knees in our face and say, God, will you just show me? What is it? Like we sang that song, like, fill me with your love and lead me to those around me, like that I can show your love to those people. And we need to be people who know what it is to say, God, if I don't know what my mountain is, if I don't know what you're calling me into and who the people I'm supposed to love are, will you just show me? Will you burden me for it? And it's a good time to start. So we're going to look at three things on this journey of Caleb. So the first thing is that sometimes it might look like madness, okay? It just might look like madness, and it did to the Israelites. Caleb was like, we're going to take this mountain, and it looked like madness to the people. He was like, we're going to take that land, and everyone was like, oh, but there's massive giants there. And I have a friend called Mitch. He's an American friend, and so we bonded in the best way possible over chocolate. That is the way, and so he's an American guy, very excited by Cadbury's dairy milk. And we lived together in Mozambique with a big bunch of us, and there were these two lads who would sell chocolate at the bottom of the base, who were obviously the most popular lads in the world. And so they were like, right, we've got a bunch of English and American people living in the base of Mozambique. What are we going to do? We are going to get hold of Cadbury's chocolate, and we are going to sell them it. And rightly so. They could have sold it at whatever price. I would have bought that. It was rice and beans and Cadbury's. That was the diet. That is all we had, rice, beans. And so me and him would go down and we'd be talking about it. And the best chocolate bar in the world is not is Cadbury's Top Deck, which is literally not available in the UK, which is just the most mad thing in the world. We'd go there and we'd say to these little 12-year-old boys, have you got any Top Deck today? And they'd be like, no, we haven't. We'd be like, leave us, come back with Top Deck. And which is maybe a bit harsh, but I was trying to teach them business. And I was like, if you bring us Top Deck, we will pay above the odds. Honestly, I will find the other Westerners, I will rob them, and I will give you their money if you give me a Top Deck. It will be worth your while. But the problem is that they got what they can get hold of. And as we'll see from Mitch, that you won't be able to tell. But all they had often was fruit and nut. And we all know fruit and nut's the worst chocolate. No one wants fruit and nut. If you go to a vending machine and it's nearly empty, the only thing left is Bounties and fruit and nut. Worst chocolate in the world. And we would, honestly, in my broken Portuguese, I'd be like, no one wants fruit and nut, mate. Stop getting fruit and nut. No one wants it. And just to prove that is Mitch sending me a picture from Cambodia, just to prove our theory. He said, all of those pink ones, they are fruit and nut. The one on the blue on the right, that is Top Deck. There's only one left because everyone's taking the Top Deck because people know what they want. And so we bonded over that. And so we were at the situation where we got together. But Mitch was a guy who owned a construction business. And so he was kind of the world's most ready-made missionary. His wife had done nursing, and he owned a construction business. And I was like, you are just tailor-made to go and just kind of, you can build houses, she can look after people. And you know what, God kind of called him out of his business. And after we'd been in Mozambique, he went back and he worked for a little while. And he said the hardest thing in the world for him was to stay in a normal job because he knew that wasn't what God had for him. And it wasn't for him, it wasn't hard to leave. It was he just had to stay for 3-4 months and really see it through. And he said, the normal life isn't for me. And he said, but he always felt God was going to call him to build in Africa or something. But you know what? God called him to work in Cambodia with children who've been sold into slavery and to bring those out. And it was so unexpected and so madness because he's like, but I'm a builder. And God was like, no, you're a person who loves people. And that's what I want you to do. I don't want you to just be a builder for this season. And it was so crazy and so mad. And people in his contacts were like, but what about the building skills? And it looked like madness. And the Life Church journey that we have, it kind of, it looked like madness, I guess, at the start. Lucas was a church leader in another church, and he was fed up with, not fed up, that's pretty, he did a lot of admin. There was a big church, and he did a lot of admin, and Lucas was like, I don't want to do admin anymore. And so he left his job as a church leader to become an accountant, which is a weird thing to do, because I'll be honest, there's a bit of admin in an accountant. I mean, all I can say is, I think I make it look good. And so Lucas was he left church leading to be an accountant, which did not last. And so kind of 5 months later, but it was God kind of saying, right, it's time to move on. And he moved him into a kind of a normal job, and but with the heart of actually there's something new coming. And then Lucas kind of got frustrated with that admin and said, I don't want to do any admin. I want to lead a church. And so we kind of came out of that place of Lucas doing that, and we stand on the verge of we planting another church in a few weeks now, nothing more than that. And that can be scary, it can be terrifying, and it can look like madness, because people can go, have we got the numbers, have we got the strength, what if? And you know what, it might look like madness, and it didn't look just like madness to the people outside of the Israelites, it looked like madness to the whole community, to all the people. The opposition came from within, and it can be so easy to go, oh, maybe we shouldn't plant a church yet, maybe we'll wait. And you know what? Sometimes we have to say, do you know what? No, we think God has told us to do this. And if God has told us to do this, then we can do it. And I'm not going to pretend to you it ain't going to look different, because it is going to look different. Lucas is not going to be here every week, and we're all going to be sad about that. And that means that you might have to have Craig at the front a lot more. And I know, Craig. I know. I'm just saying he was mean to me before, so I'm just saying. And so we kind of stand on that verge, but we don't want to kind of be people who are afraid of that, because the whole thing is, as we're going to see, the reason that the Israelites didn't go into the land, most of them, is not because the giants stopped them. It's not because they had a fight and these giants beat them. The reason that nobody went in is they never took them on. It was the fear of the giants that stopped them going in, not the giants themselves. It was them saying, we cannot do this, and they just said, well, we're not even going to try. We are going to look them in the eye and we are going to walk away. And you know what? Everybody got what they believed in that place. Like Caleb and Joshua said, look, if God's with us, we can do it. And and they are the people who went and took those giants on, and they are the people who went and took the land. Everybody else who just said, no, we can't do it, they shied away and they never did it. And so you know what? We can't remove faith from that story. We can't remove the ability of kind of having to trust God with what he's calling us into. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. And you know what? Sometimes we stand on the verge of things that can be scary. And pretty much for all of us, the calling on our lives is probably bigger than we can cope with. It's bigger than we can kind of manage ourselves. And I think it's meant to be, because it's meant to be something that we can only achieve when we trust in God. When we put our trust there and say, God, this is way too big for me. And I think sometimes he smiles and goes, yeah, maybe you're finally getting it. This is way too big for you, because I'm going to do this and I'm going to take you into that place. I don't want to give you a calling that you can manage, that you can cope with. I don't want to give you a calling that is in your hands. And there's this great quote from Bill Johnson that says, if you live cautiously, all your friends will call you wise. You just won't move any mountains. And it's just so challenging, because I'm like, my kind of default as an accountant is to kind of manage and plan and budget and think, and can we do this? Does it make sense? And that is the world in which I work and inhabit. But you know what? That is not the world in which I want my kind of heart to come alive. That is not the way I want to live my life, to say, oh, God, I've weighed up the pros and cons, and we know we want wisdom. We do want to make these decisions, but you know what? We don't want to be people who look at it and go, oh, this is just too difficult and too hard to do. I'm going to ask for a favor. I'm just going to check my time. Oh, okay, we're all right. I am going to ask a favor that, and so I do the youth stuff here, and I just want to ask in the kindest possible way, and I don't think many of you say it, but there's a phrase that I hate, which is spoke over our young people a lot, which is not necessarily in this church all the time, but that it's like, oh, it's the hardest time ever to be a young person. And like, I don't know, I just don't want us to say that anymore, because like that builds giants in front of them that we do not want to put there. Okay, we don't want to say, oh, look, oh, it's just too hard. It's the hardest time. Oh, I couldn't be a kid these days. It's just too hard. Because then they're like, oh, cheers for that. But you know what? God's not created them at this time by accident. It's not a fluke that they're here. They're not the unlucky ones that get born into this generation. You know what? They were born for this time. They were born to be Christians in their schools right now in this season. And we're not going to be the people who say, oh, it's really tough for you. But you know what? Trust us, the people who work with you, we know it's hard. Like, when none of us are going to go and say, hey, guys, I'm assuming you had a great week, so it was easy. None of us are saying that. We get it. But we have a bunch of people who know what it is to stare down this kind of society in the face and say, hey, we believe in a God who is bigger. We believe that it might be tough, but God is calling us to bigger things. And we need to be people who stand side by side with them in that. Like, Caleb was not a guy who stood alone. There was a guy with him called Joshua. And the two of them stood up. It wasn't just Caleb. The two of them said, hey, we can do this. You know, and as I was writing this down, I did not know Joel was going to get up today. Now, just in case you doubt me, I've got it printed out here, and it's in a box in green. And so I did not create that this morning when Lucas was doing it. And so, I really felt God was saying, Joel with his ministry, I've written down here, Joel needs people like Joshua with him. He needs people to stand with him and dream. He needs people. And I knew that before. I thought that God was saying that in July. You know, and so sometimes God makes it very clear that people in this room need to stand with him. People and you do not need to do a kickflip. And you can do a kickflip if you want. Maybe they'll be really impressed if Lucas did a kickflip. I think they would be. But you don't need to do Joel just needs people who will dream with him. He doesn't need people to advise and tell it. He just needs people to say, hey, Joel, we believe in you. We believe that God has given you this vision and that God is going to give you these people. He is going to call you to reach out to these young people, and he needs people who will stand with him and say, hey, there's a million reasons not to do this, but there's a reason to do it, and that's that God has called you to do it. And you know what? And I fully believe that there are a couple of people in this room today that really need to kind of think, yeah, do you know what? As Joel shared about this unreached people, about these people who no one's kind of ministering to, something inside you went, yeah, I'm with you, Joel. Well, you need to speak to Joel, and you need to get alongside him, and you need to pray with him and just dream with him. And then let him, do what, I don't know how you're going to plan it, but that's fine. But we need people to kind of dream with, not just people who would stand with us in the dark times and the difficult times. We massively need those. But I really felt we're in a season where we need to be people who dream together. In our life groups, we need to be people who know what it is to say, hey, I believe in this. I think God's going to call us to do this. And really dream together, rather than just be there for each other, which is so important. And we also need people who say, hey, what's on your heart? What do you want to do? How can we get there? How do we dream together? How do we pray? How do we seek God for whatever it is in this next season? We want to be a church of dreamers. We want to be a church and know what it is to follow each other into the kind of tough places because God is leading us there, and say, I'm going to go with you. I'm going to stand on your side, and you're going to be on my side as we really seek what it is to have God. And so I would encourage you to kind of sit and kind of talk with people this week about just big things and the things that maybe God's put on your heart, or even if you don't have something, to say, hey, will you just kind of pray with me, because I want to know what God has called me to do. I want to know what God has put on my heart. Ask people to have those conversations. It might be awkward. So flipping what? Let's have some awkward conversations. I'm past not having awkward conversations anymore. And so we want to be people who come alive and deal with that. The second point's a quicker, don't you worry. I'm aware of the time. Acknowledge the giants, but don't fear them. So Caleb and Joshua, do not pretend that these giants are not there. There is nowhere in that passage where these people are, oh man, there's these crazy giants. And Caleb's like, well, I didn't see any giants. He's saying, yeah, and if God's with us, we're going to take those giants down. When I used to play football, we had quite a small team. Some of you will know that I lost some weight recently, and my feet shrunk, because apparently that's a freaky thing that happens. I had to Google, what, are my feet going to disappear? So I Googled, if you lose weight, do your feet shrink? Which is the weirdest Google I did this year. And so it turns out, yes, they can. And I felt a little bit less weird at that point. But I'm a relatively small man. And so when we were playing football, certainly when you're a junior, there's massive differences in height. And we were playing this team, and they were a private school kind of team, and they were all really big and strong. And we were we're quite a small, scrappy little unit. We're pretty rough, but we were small, and we were these are big lads. And we were a bit intimidated, thinking, oh no, they're bigger than us. Maybe they're going to be stronger than us. And then, during the match, we found out that one of them, now I'm hoping not to offend anybody, but it's written down, so I'm going with it. One of them was called Raphael. Now, I grew up in Grimsby, and we did not have a multicultural society. Raphael was the funniest thing in the world to us, because the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles were around at the time, and that is a name of a turtle. And there was Raphael there, and we were, literally, someone shouted, hey, Raphael, to get the ball off him, and my mate literally went, Raphael, mate. And we all just burst out laughing mid-pitch. And he was probably like, just my name. And every time there was like a corner, we'd be like, who's marking Raphael? Who's got Donatello? We're split. And like, we were just naming turtles. And this guy must be like, are you just weird children? Yes, we are. But it was just like, all of a sudden, these big, scary lads, they had no fear for us anymore because he was called Raphael. And we're like, you can't be scared of a Raphael. It's literally not possible. Like, where's Michelangelo? There's no fear there anymore. Like, we aren't going to take you down. And we beat him like 5-0. And but they brought it down to our size. And Caleb's like, yeah, they are giants, but so what? We're going to take these giants down, but we need to acknowledge those giants sometimes. We can't bury our head and pretend these things are going to happen. Like when we plant North Church, it's okay to say, I don't know how things are going to look if Lucas isn't here 2 or 3 weeks in a month. And be a little bit worried about that. It's all right to do that because that is a reality. We can't pretend that it's going to be the same because then when we get there, it's not. We kind of look these things in the eye and say, right, if I'm going to do this, God, it's going to be difficult. Like when Joel goes out to those kids, you know what? If you go with him and there's 30 skaters, you might be like, oh, I don't know what it's going to be like when I don't really understand their culture. Well, do you know what? The first time that might happen, it might be awkward, it might be scary, and it's important to face that and go, but I'm going to push through that for a bigger reason. I have a million giants that I kind of have to face. It feels like, no matter what there are giants that would tell me not to do anything worthwhile, whether it's speaking here, whether it's young people. There's a million voices that would always tell me reasons why I can't do anything, why I don't want to be up here, or I can't do this, and all these kind of million reasons. I don't want you to think, oh, yeah, but it's all right for you guys with microphones because, you're obviously all together and strong, and it's utter nonsense. It's just nonsense. I kind of get up. A year ago, I spoke here for the first time in about a year, and I was like, I hid in a scout costume like a weirdo. And I was like, people don't want to hear from me. They don't want to know what I've gone through. They don't want to hear about a guy who's been through what I've been through. Just get somebody else to do it. And I tried to ask him about a million times saying, God, don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Because you know what? I let these kind of giants say, hey, you don't belong there. You don't deserve to be there. And you know what? And we can give them credibility and let them speak over our lives. Or we can look them in the eye and say, do you know what? If I'm going to do that, I have to say, do you know what? I am going to have to face that fear of being unworthy. I am going to have to face that fear that, do you know what? If I start stepping into that, I might fail and I might mess it up, because it puts it on the table. When you start something new, failure goes on the table. When we start north, it might be a mess. It might be that things aren't organized very well. It might be very, really difficult. All that's on the table. It'll be easier not to do it. I don't know about you, I don't want to live those easy lives. I don't want to live the kind of life that says, let's just keep the things the way they are. Let's not go into that promised land. Let's just stay in the desert, because you know what? It's easy in the desert. We've got enough food, Moses. We're not dying. Let's just stay where we are. And you miss what God has called you to do. And so I've got kind of 2 pictures with our young people. And so, a year ago, I started doing the work with the young people. And I really kind of, hear me out, I really didn't want to do it in terms of I wanted better people. I was like, oh man, there's got to be somebody better. We prayed a lot. We were like, right, come on, God. It's like, Ian, step down. There is going to be somebody else to do this. Because I just thought they don't want a guy who's been through the stuff that I went through. The parents won't want me to do this. Oh my goodness, there's got to be someone else, and got to be somebody else, and there's got to be somebody else. And eventually, I got to the stage where I went away with them to Soul Survivor for 1 day. And the guy who was preaching, I tried to give God a million reasons why I was not the guy for the job. And as I went there, the guy who was speaking from the front, he was telling the story of Moses and Aaron, or Moses and God, and how Moses says to God, seriously, God, I can't do this because, and he gives him a million reasons, and God's like, no, 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 and he's like, God's almost like, you're going to stop this because you are the person to lead these people. And this guy said it, and he just said, and do you know what, there's a couple of youth leaders, and you need to stop doing this, saying, there's other people, can you give me somebody else? Maybe there's another reason why I can't do it. And he said, somebody here, you're about to take it on, you need to stop saying that now. And it's almost like God saying, right, enough. And I was like, all right, God, enough. All right, I get it. And the thing is, I had to kind of look that kind of giants in the eye and say, right, okay, God, I'm going to stare that down and kind of say, right, I'm going to somehow lead these young people. I don't know how that's going to work. But you know what? We've had the most incredible year. And for the first time, and a lot of people say a lot of kind stuff to you, and a lot of people saying, spoke to me over the last, year or two saying, I really believe the best days are yet to come, and that's good, and it's nice that people say that, but probably this night, there's this picture and there's another picture where we had this amazing night where God kind of moved and he kind of spoke to a lot of the young people, and I looked over and there's a bunch of them praying with each other over there, and there's a bunch of them who are going forward to just kind of cry out for more of God. There's a bunch of them kind of just sitting on the floor crying together and praying, and then they went out and then they went to this bonfire and they were all hanging out and having a great time together. And for the first time probably in a year, that I really genuinely thought, maybe the best days are yet to come. Maybe these are the days. And I was like, started to really see that God, who promises that the best days will be in the future, who says, look, I'm still going to be with you. I'm going to bring you into new things. I started to think, you know what, maybe this God is maybe better than I even know he is. And that these best days can still be there. And we're going to see this in the final stage where we see Caleb and the final set of passages that we're going to look at. And, I'm kind of coming into land, but I did read the Bible, so that gets me an extra 5 minutes because there was a lot of reading. I'm just saying. So we're going to look at just Joshua 14. We're going to just turn into Joshua chapter 14, reading this last couple of bits. And so the Israelites, they have kind of, a whole generation has kind of died in the desert and never seen this country. Joshua and Caleb, those two men, they have gone in. They are the only two people in that generation. They go in and they take the land. And they are living there, and they've been there now for about 5 years. But for Caleb, that is not enough. Caleb is like, right, we have taken this land, but I am not stopping there. And so Joshua 14, verses 6 through to 12, it says, now the people of Judah approached Joshua and Caleb. And Caleb, son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, hey, you know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, at Kadesh Barnea about you and me? I was 40 years old when Moses sent me from Kadesh Barnea to explore the land. And I brought him back a report according to my convictions. But my fellow Israelites who went up with me made the heart of the people sink. However, I followed the Lord wholeheartedly. So on that day, Moses swore to me, the land in which your feet have walked will be your inheritance and that of your children forever, because you have followed the Lord your God, Lord my God, wholeheartedly. Now then, just as the Lord promised, he has kept me alive for 45 years, since the time he said this to Moses, while Israel moved about in the wilderness. So here I am today, 85 years old. I am still as strong as the day Moses sent me out. I am still as vigorous to go to battle as I was there. Now, give me this hill country the Lord promised me that day. You yourself heard the Anakites were there, and their cities were large, but the Lord helped me. I will drive them out just as he said. And so Caleb is there, 85 years old, and he's saying, look, we are in the promised land, but we are not where I was promised. And he is saying, I have waited 45 years for this, and I am 85, and I am taking this down. And he's saying, you give me permission, and I am going for it. Because, you know what, Caleb's not happy with just, do you know what, I've seen a bit of what God promised me. He's saying, that is not enough. I don't want a bit of what God's promised me. I want everything that God's promised me. I want to do everything that God has called me to do. And I want to have the land that God has called me to land. And so the third thing we've got, and the final thing, is not settling for nearly, not settling for almost the calling that God has had. And you know what, Lucas talked a little bit this morning. I had a story about my dad, who's 86 now, breaking into an old lady's home, but we haven't got time for that. That'll keep. And so he didn't go to prison. It was a good breaking and entering story. And so Lucas taught this morning about the kind of 5-year vision of north, east, south, west, and how this kind of planting this new congregation is really kind of almost the fulfillment of that, and then the start of a new. It's not like, yeah, we've completed Life Church, high five, we're done, see you later, game over. It's a start of a new vision, and it's a start of new things, and it's a start of just many of us kind of saying, yeah, you know what, I feel God's putting this in me, and we want to be that kind of church. But I want to take you even further back than the vision that Lucas talked about. And so, when Life Church kind of started, we did early on have this north, east, south, west vision. But you know what? 5 months before Life Church started, that wasn't the first vision. 5 months before Life Church started, when I moved to this community, and there was just me and Anna here, the reason that we moved to this community to do a church was because in this school, Thomas Bottler, we knew of a bunch of young people, and we didn't feel that they would fit in any of the churches around there. And what we wanted was the young people of this school to know Jesus and to be in a church that that they could grow and know about him. And do you know what? 5 years down the line, we have not seen people come through from that school. We just haven't. Like, and I could tell you some amazing stories about people in this room and in other congregations that would not be here if kind of God hadn't called us to Life Church and to kind of share the gospel. And we can tell you stories of lives transformed. And we could stop Life Church today and it's been completely worth it. It just has. But you know what? When I was here, before anything else happened, like, that is not the vision. The vision for me was there is a school of kids here and I want them to know me. And you know what? That has not yet happened. I did warn people that I might cry. And so, you know, my second mountain is not just these young people that we've got in the room. You know, it's to be in this school and to say, hey, there's a God who loves these people, like Joel with his skaters, and it's saying, hey, this is a vision that God gave us at the start. And we could say, do you know what, God, I've kind of moved on, I've got other stuff in. I'm saying, you know what? We all know Anna's not here anymore. And you know what? It feels like, you know, in a sense, I'm kind of last man standing with that vision. But you know what? If God called us to that mountain, we're having that mountain. You know, we're going nowhere. And so, I was going to read something. There's no way in a million years I'm reading that. I am a coward. Sometimes the Giants win. No, they don't. Now I have to read it. Maybe. And so, the thing is, when you do that, when you step into these kind of mountains, you know what? The Giants, they will kind of shout at you. I came here a few weeks before the end of term, and the head was like, oh, Adam Della, are you related to Anna Della? And I was like, oh, and it's just like a knife that goes in and goes, yeah. You know, and it's just this reminder of, you know what, you might be here to kind of reach out to these kids, but there is an enemy who will tell you can't do it, and he will remind you of the things that have failed. He will remind you of the things that do not exist anymore. And he will say, hey, you can't do this because this has failed. And so I don't stand here telling you this kind of message about kind of overcoming the giants because it's a nice little message and it's a good theory. I stand here because, you know, it's a message that many of us live. And it's a message that many of us fight with. We know what it is to be pushed away from the vision that God has called us. And this was birthed out of a kind of a meal I went on for my mate's birthday, and it was a great meal, and we just had a great time. And I knew that God was calling me to this kind of place with the kids in the school and to the young people of Life Church. Undoubtedly, I just knew it. And and I wrote this, and it just said, I said, like, that life is good. It's a bit daunting, it's dead busy, but it's really good. And like, you care about what you do, you love the people around you, and you know what you're called to. You know the dreams that God has put in your hearts, even though you have no idea to get there. You go for a meal to celebrate a friend's birthday, and you have a great night filled with laughter and stories and good food. You sit among people of a similar age, you have good conversations, and you feel alive. And then it hits. On the walk to the car, as all the couples go to the next bar and back to their lives, the post-mortem begins, that you miss having that number of like-minded, similar-aged people in your stage in your life. You miss sitting and just eating and talking with no agenda. And then you feel every one of your 35 years and every bit of your singleness. You recognize the lack of people like you that you have and the hole that produces in your life. You meet a woman that you were supposed to be set up with over 10 years ago, and she's married with kids, and you think about the life you might have had, and then the questions roll around like, why is there nobody else like you around? What could life have been like? How did you get here? And from there, it's a small jump to an easy solution. Maybe you just move to Manchester. Maybe you join Ivy, a church with, you know, more people of your own age. Maybe you can be around people a bit more like you like that. Maybe you'll meet a woman who actually likes you. Maybe you'll have less things in the diary. Maybe you'll spin fewer plates. Maybe life will be easier. And then easier, that word, it sticks in the throat like a splash of water to the face. It feels like a wake-up call. Like you have two things that God has put on your heart to do. To bring kids from Bottler into relationship with Jesus and to help the youth of Life Church to really follow him. You know this so clearly, and you have no idea how to do either of them, but you know that is your mission. Yet in the space of one meal, you can be knocked off it. Your head can be turned to the point where you lose sight of the thing that matters the most. So I wrote that, and I thought, you know what? I know the land. I know what I'm supposed to take. I know what I'm supposed to do. And in the space of like just going out for a meal with friends, it just felt like it could be torn away so quickly. And you know what? We need people who will stand with us. We need people who say, hey, these are the dreams that God's given us, and we're going to take that land. And so, I'm just gonna kind of finish, because we have a God that kind of knows this. Jesus kind of came and he lived it knowing that it was madness to live on this earth, knowing it's ridiculous to come and be born in a stable and to kind of give your life for a flawed and broken people. He pulled a bunch of people around him, like Joshua and Caleb, who would stand with him, who would stand then together and believe in this God. And he knew what it was to look the giants in the eye and to never quit and say, hey, I'm going to defeat those giants so that my people, thousands of years' time, they can look at the giants in the eye and they can say, hey, we have a God who knows what it is to beat giants, and he's still in the business of beating giants. And so I'm just going to kind of pray, and the band are going to get up, and I'm sorry, I have gone over time there. And so I'm just going to finish there. And so God, we just pray that you would help us to be people who know what it is to take what you have called us to do. Lord, we don't want to be people who are the same as other people, but behave slightly differently. We want to be people who are marked by your kingdom. We want to be people who are marked by the things that you've given us to do and the kind of vision that you've asked us to carry. Lord, we want to show the world outside of these walls who you are and how much you matter. Lord, so just help us to live that out. Help us to be bold. Help us to stare down any giants that would come at us and just expose them for the liars they are and point them to a God who is bigger, who is stronger, and who is always going to be the one who can beat the giants. Yeah, help us to do that, we pray. Amen.
Great. We're going to let's just stand together, shall we? We're just going to sing as we finish. And the Bible says that God's prepared good works in advance for us to do. And God has things for all of us to pick up this morning, okay? That's all of us, everyone. God's not called us to do nothing. God's called us to do something. And for some of us, that might mean that we need to pick things up that we've put down before we should have done. And I would encourage you this morning just to allow the Holy Spirit just to challenge your heart about what it is that you should be doing. What mountain does God want you to take for him? So Lord, we submit our lives to you. And as we conclude our gathering this morning, we just come and sing these words again, just as a love song to you. Yeah, Lord, I pray that we won't be like the guy who looks in the mirror and as he walks away forgets what he's seen. But Lord, I pray that as your word has come into our hearts and lives this morning, that we would, by your grace, be doers of your word. That you would move us from where we are to where we need to be in order that we'll do the things you've called us to do. In Jesus' name, let's sing together.